Hello, today I'm going to be painting this countryside scene with a little road in Procreate on an iPad. This is an iPad 13 Pro and I'm using the screen resolution for the size, which is 2500-ish by 2000, something like that. Anything above 2000 will do. So first of all, I start by creating lots of big shapes, and I have a reference which I'm roughly copying. I'll stick it on the screen for a second so you can see it, but I don't really try to copy it. It's just a guide and for where I want to put the big shapes. So on each layer I use the select tool with freehand color fill. You see the little bucket down the bottom rightish, and this enables me to do big shapes quickly and get a rough idea of the colors. It's a lot easier than sketching it out and then painting over the top, which is fine if you want to do that, but I find this much quicker. And one thing that's nice about using this is you get the sharp edges. So for my style, or this style, I like it to be kind of graphic-y, like a vector look. But Procreate doesn't do vectors anyway, so that's not really an option. There are other apps on the iPad that can do vectors quite nicely actually, but they're very time consuming. They take a lot longer than using this tool. So you only really need vectors if you want to scale the picture very big or very small and manipulate the shapes, etc. I don't really want to do that. I just like the look, but I don't really need all the versatility that the vectors actually give you. So I find this a good compromise, and it's been working well for me. So try this tool out to do the big shapes. That's not to say you can't use the brushes. If you prefer, doing the painting, then use brushes. I swap between both. I don't try to mix them when I'm doing one painting. It's kind of one or the other, because if you start mixing styles, it gets a little bit difficult. You'll see later I do use the brush a little bit, and just usually there's only one problem with this tool really, is when details get a bit small. It's hard to actually use this tool because it gets a little bit fiddly. So like I said, I do use the brush, and I'm using one now. It's from the painting section in Procreate, and it's called Flat Brush. It doesn't really matter which brush you use for this, because I only use it when it's very small. So when the brush is very small, the actual type of brush doesn't really matter, because it all looks the same when it gets really small. So use whichever brush you like. And I'm putting in some details in the background. I don't really follow the reference for this, because the reference is so complicated and it's got so much stuff going on in the background. It's not really possible to see what's going on unless I gridded it out or something like that, and I don't really want to do that. So I roughly place where I think fields would go, and I generally just make that up. And then to add interest, you can see I'm changing the field colors slightly here and there just to make it build up. And one thing to note, at the back where it starts to blend in with the mountain there, I'm using kind of bluey greens, so it pushes it back into the distance and then blends with the mountain a little bit better. That's sort of optional. You don't really need to do it, but it just makes the colors blend in the background. So there's one little trick I use here. You can see I'm not really careful where I'm putting the color fill select tool, but it's only going onto the cloud shadow underneath. So if you create a new layer above the color, whichever underneath color you've got, and you click on that layer and you choose clip and mask, it will mean that only the pixels underneath get colored in, which is quite nice. I use that everywhere. So if you see me being messy, it's probably because I have clip and mask on, and you can see a little arrow on your layer to tell you you've got clip and mask on. So I use that quite a lot. So I've kind of got all the basic shapes in now, so it will be highlighting. So I've already highlighted the clouds, you can see there, and the sun is coming from the top left. So I'm basically going to do the same for all the other blocks. So I'll create new layers, turn on that clip and mask again, so I don't need to be neat, and then I can create these highlights very quickly and just finishing off clouds there. And I'm using that clip and mask layer that you can see, and I'm still using the same tool I use for this painting. It's 90% the select tool with the color fill. So any big shape I'll be using that, but if I get small details I'll have to use a brush, but that's only really in the background, so whenever I can I'll use the big tool. So for the sky I put in a big blob and then I use Gaussian blur, which just blurs it out and smooths it. So usually in the sky it's light down the bottom and then a mid-tone and then darker and more saturated up the top, and for this style it works very nicely because it's nice and smooth and contrasts all the harsh shapes. So I jump back down to the road, and one thing you want to do with these types of paintings is not have too many straight lines. So I kind of break it up there. It doesn't probably seem like a big deal, but too many straight lines just looks kind of off and it looks artificial. So you don't want to go crazy. You don't need big, chunks missing or anything, but just little bits here and there kind of implies that there's little bits of grass on the road, etc. So I'm still doing the highlight section, but I've noticed the sky down the bottom is a bit too dark and doesn't blend in with the clouds much. So I do the same again, but all I do is lighten the bottom bit and to blend in the clouds. It wasn't so much the sky was wrong, it was the clouds weren't blending in very well. So just a little fix. So I'm onto this big tree up the front, the leaves. Now you notice I don't, especially in this style, in most styles actually that I paint, I don't try and paint leaves individually or anything because it's I find it too boring, to be honest. So I try to, and everything in this painting is kind of just representing shapes. It's all really about shapes and the colors and the contrast, etc. So I try to make these look like leaves as best as possible without actually painting leaves. Now it is, that sounds probably quite simple, but it's not, and sometimes it really looks wrong. I don't think this one looks too bad, and it's getting better. What I'm looking for is like 3 layers. So I got the underside, which is in shadow, obviously, then the mid, and then some sort of highlight, which is a bit more yellowy. And so all I'm really trying to convey is like it's got shape to it, and you can tell that they're leaves. I think it kind of works. Obviously this is highly stylized and is not meant to be individual leaves. You could probably do more here, but for this concept I didn't really want to, and to be honest it's about 6 o'clock in the morning right now and I'm not really fully awake, so I kept this painting as simple as possible. So I'm gonna do pretty much the same for a while now, and it's created new layers and put in highlights wherever the sun will hit. And so I'm usually trying to find colors that work, but are all slightly different, and I don't have a color palette or anything, I make it up. But really what I'm doing is trying to make sure I have variations in colors. And with the color wheel, I keep on, you'll notice I don't use the wheel actually, I use the square thing, which I can't remember what it's called right now in Procreate. So you got a bunch of palette, the color types in Procreate, and I like the square one. It's just easier to pick colors because you got more space. The color wheel one, you can't really see exactly what you're picking, so you saw it just quickly there, but you'll see me using the square one all the time. I advise to use that one. It's much easier. And so I'm just speeding this up now because it's roughly the same concept here. But what you'll notice is I vary the colors and put shapes inside the shapes. So the basic concept is get the big block down, start to add highlights, and then add variations of highlights. Now you can go quite a lot with that. You could put lots more variations in them as long as they're subtle. They have to be quite subtle unless there's a big change in the sun. So you'll notice like on the hill to the left, that's in bright sun, and then the bottom left part is in shadow. So you're allowed a big contrast like that, but when it's in the same kind of part of the sun, you have to keep it similar. So I'm doing the same thing to the road. Now, if you notice roads, they're always broken up where they've had roadworks and stuff, and patches where they've dug it up and fixed it and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite nice to put like these little squares everywhere, but again, they need to be subtle unless it's in shadow. So you'll see me here trying to blend it in a little bit more, struggling actually to find the right colors. So this will take me a few goes, and I'll shift the colors and keep on trying until it blends in better. And like I said, it takes me a few goes and I've actually got it wrong again. So don't be surprised if blending these colors in takes a while. It still takes a while for me to find these colors, and I don't nail it every time either. So it can be a little bit tricky. But as long as you have enough interest in there, you can probably go overboard like with everything, so be a bit careful. But as long as they're subtle, you'll be okay. And I wanted to break this road up with some of the lines just to add a bit more interest. Although I've just noticed that it's like right in the middle of the painting. You kind of want to avoid that most of the time. Try and get things offset if you can. So you don't need to be miles offset, just as long as it's not right in the middle, which I think it is. So that's a bit annoying, but it's only a little part of the detail, so it's probably not such a big deal. But you'll notice the road isn't symmetrical. You gotta watch for things like that. So on the right hand side of the road, it goes right to the edge, but on the left hand side, it's is a bit more of a gap to the edge. So little things like that make a big difference, because we tend to, when we're making things up ourselves and not copying things exactly, we tend to create symmetry, and we don't, oddly, we like to create symmetry, but we don't often like to look at it in paintings, and we want different patterns. I think we get bored with symmetry if we're looking at a painting, but weirdly, when we try and paint, we love to paint symmetry, so watch out for that. And it's taken me quite many attempts to make sure that I don't repeat the shapes I use everywhere, so I consciously make sure that I don't do that, and if I'm not careful, I'll still do it. So be careful that when you're creating a tree, for example, you don't create 3 trees right next to each other that are exactly the same. It takes a bit of getting used to, but and most of the time you'll probably still do it, but as long as you just go back and change it. I probably got symmetry here somewhere that probably doesn't look good, so it's really hard to catch yourself doing it. So usually I'll review the painting at the end and just make sure there's nothing crazy. You'll always have a little bit of symmetry, which is fine, just not have loads, like 3 rocks in a row that are the same, that kind of stuff. Maybe now I've said it, you might notice it in your own paintings. So this is about it, just adding a few colors, a little bit of detail, just making sure everything looks good. But I'm pretty much done. So if you liked that and found it useful, give me a sub and a like, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.